Funny thing, they found Jim's watch down in the rocks still ticking. I thought, how ironic that, life is lost and this worthless watch is still ticking.
Where is God when the human spirit is overwhelmed with grief? Or the thousands die in a national tragedy like the World Trade Center? Or you lose the very dearest person in life to you? The fact is that the experience of death and dying is a universal reality that continues to confront us with the questions about God. In today's program, you're going to meet some individuals who are going to share out of their experience some very deeply moving insights into God, simply because some of them are facing their own imminent deaths. Some of them are grappling with a horrific loss. We need to consider grief as a nation, and so later on in our program, I'm going to be talking with a stress and trauma expert who at this very moment is counseling on the site of the World Trade Center. How do we as Americans cope with grief and death in the picture of our national experience? But first of all, a woman whose world fell apart and whose life caved in with a single phone call.
My husband was working on a documentary film at the time and wanted to take some footage up in Alaska. He had enough miles on his travel bank to take both our boys with 3 tickets. So they were pretty excited to get to go to Alaska.
In August of 1990, Pat's husband Jim and 2 of their 4 children, 13-year-old Tony and 11-year-old Joey, flew from Los Angeles to Anchorage, Alaska. While there, they called home with stories of caribou sightings and new friends they met in outlying villages. They were scheduled to return in 10 days.
It was Monday afternoon, and my husband and my 2 sons were due to land in LAX from Anchorage. One of our workers had gone there to meet them, and they didn't get off the plane. And of course, they don't disclose who's on the plane or who's not, usually. But he called me, and I hadn't heard anything. I had no reason to think that they wouldn't be there. So I had to call our friends in Alaska, and that's when I found out that their small plane had never landed in Anchorage the night before.
The night before, on Sunday night, a storm blasted Anchorage. Caught in the storm, the pilot of the 6-passenger Cessna carrying Pat's husband and children radioed Anchorage Airport for help. The storm had actually blown the plane 20 miles off course. Minutes later, it slammed into the rocky peaks of the Talkeetna Mountains. Back at their home in Northern California, Pat and her 2 other children waited and prayed through Monday night.
During the day, Tuesday, I was calling search and rescue every couple hours. And in the afternoon, they told me they had sighted the plane and they were sending helicopters in. So I called my brother and told him, and he called them to get more details. He found out that they were trying to find a sheriff to come up to my house. And that way he got the news out of them and told them that he wanted to come and tell me himself.
Later that afternoon, Pat's father and brother arrived at the Arrabito home where several other family members and friends had already gathered. Taking Pat outside, her brother Tom relayed the message he heard from Search and Rescue in Alaska.
My brother just said there are no survivors. And I just heard those words just whirling around in my head over and over, no survivors, no survivors. And then I'm thinking, yes, there are survivors, because there's me and my other 2 children. And I don't know how long we were out there. It was kind of a timeless time. I went back in the house, and my kids had been sitting on people's laps. They came over. My daughter was almost 9, my son's 7. And they just both came over and climbed on my lap, and I hugged him, and my son said, "My daddy's dead, isn't he?" And I just nodded, and my daughter said, "And Tony and Joey?" I said, "Yeah." And there was just such a huge sense of how can this be true, and how can somebody who was just there not be anymore? And it's almost like you're in another world. I can't even describe how the sense of floating in space and time, and It was just overwhelming. It was really hard to go to bed that night. It was really hard to go to bed and know that I was going to go to bed alone from then on. It was hard for my kids to sleep. They both climbed in bed with me. In fact, they climbed in bed with me for the next year. They didn't want to sleep alone. And even, as I can't describe the feelings that I had trying to go to sleep. I think it took me quite a while. But in the midst of it all, there was still a sense that God was right there. I had such a sense of God's presence. And it was an odd thing to me. I mean, it was noteworthy that in the midst of the most agonizing experience I think I could ever have, I still felt this center of peace within me, in a sense that God was right there, and that whatever agony I was enduring, God was too. And He was right there with me, enduring it, and I wasn't alone. There's lots of things I can't answer about God, but I know that He's good, and I know that He has been there. He carried me, and I told Him, you have to just keep carrying me because I cannot walk alone. And He's carried me ever since.
One final note. In August of 2001, Pat Arabito and her 2 children flew to the site of the plane crash in Alaska. Her friends had built a monument in remembrance of her husband Jim and her 2 sons. She called it one of the most powerful experiences of her life. We'll have much more when we come right back.
Of course, it's against all our instincts as human beings. Of course, it's against our feelings of compassion. But it's the way of the universe.
We learned English.
Your kids can too.
Just watch Hello Channel.
This powers a pump inside my heart. And if the pump in the heart failed, or if I didn't have these batteries, well, I'd go into a heart cardiac failure. So I live with the presence of death, or the possibility of death. And indeed, in fact, just looking at it, I can see this is about to run out, so I'll have to change it.
From now on, when you and I see the New York City skyline, it will be a reminder of how utterly fragile and transient human life really is. In fact, to hear the word death, to speak it, for most of us there is aroused an inner foreboding, a sense of fear. Dr. Rob George is a clinical director of a London palliative center, what we in this country would call a hospice. Day and night he lives with death and dying. Listen to what he has to say about death.
I think that, well, I know that there is such a thing as a healthy death. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? I don't mean a death that's been surrounded by roses and soft music and everybody sitting around. I mean a death that's made sense in the context of the life, that has moved someone to the place where they're going forward through death into something else, and where they've engaged with and addressed the tensions and conflicts that their life has brought to them, and how they've got a hold of those, and how they've wrung meaning and sense out of that life and also out of that dying process.
Peter Houghton has first-hand knowledge of what it's like to prepare for a healthy death. He nearly died of heart failure before receiving the experimental artificial heart that continues to extend his life.
So I'd said all my goodbyes and thank yous and tried to put everything right that was wrong, and I was ready to die. I'd done all I could. And at that point you have to reach into yourself, into your own personal strength, into your own sense of, in my case, of God and the Holy Spirit, and rely on that to take you through the last and unpleasant hours. And in a way, that's a very inspiring experience, because the sense that you are connected with the universe and there is a presence comes to you in a moment of extremity. And I found that personally wonderful.
Connie Jeffrey has felt that presence in a moment of extremity. She lost both of her parents within 8 months of each other. Even so, she describes watching her mother die as one of 2 times she experienced an especially powerful sense of the presence of God.
One was 16 and a half years ago at the birth of my only son, and the other was last week at my mother's bedside as she died. And those two experiences have taught me more about the presence of God and His power in my life than any other thing. And He was there at the birth. He is there at our death. He is there all the way through if we let Him be. And it's just a powerful, powerful concept to know He is the giver of life, and He's there at the end, and we have a great hope.
According to Peter Houghton, there's one aspect of dying which at first glance may seem a little odd. He says humor can play an important role.
I think there's two reasons a sense of humor is important. The first is the people around you need you to have it. They need to feel that when they're dealing with you, that you can take it lightheartedly, and that you can crack the old joke right up to the end. And it's very noticeable the better response people who are in the last stage of dying get when they have a sense of humor from their people around them than when they just lapse into depression. The second thing I found myself is that you just absolutely had to laugh at the world, you know, and all the things that were being done around you. You had to see the ridiculousness of it and the transience of it, because that kept your own morale going. And it was possible to see the humor in terminal stage care, and that helped me a lot personally, and I've seen it help others.
I know a lady who's been worried in the last week that she's enjoying herself too much because she's actively dying now. She's been concerned that she's not dwelling on the serious and worrying things about the future of her soul and that kind of stuff. I think it's fantastic because it means we can bring lightness to very painful areas. The ability to laugh at the painful things actually robs them of their power.
You've got to have laughter, and you've got to have as much love as you possibly can. I mean, look around you, it's summer. I never expected to see another summer. I mean, life is a miracle, isn't it? And we have to find out what this wonderful miracle's for.
We need to live every day as if it's our last or our loved one's last, because we want to be able to say those things. We want them to know they are loved. And because my dad went to sleep one night and didn't wake up the next morning, I didn't have a chance to really say my goodbyes and tell him how much I loved him. When I went into Dad's room the morning after he died, I was numb, and I was sad, and I had 100 different emotions, conflicting emotions, and I was scared. It was the first death I'd experienced. And when I went in there, I found his Bible open to where he'd been reading the night before, Revelation 22, the very last chapter, the last words of the Bible. And surely I come quickly, even so come, Lord Jesus. And I was comforted by that. I believe that was a message, and God was saying to me, it's okay, you know, it's going to be okay.
There are 5 things we should try and do. We should remember, as the Buddhists say, everything is sorrow, everything comes to an end. And we should remember, as the Christians say, and everything is renewed, but not the same. And we should remember, as the Taoists in China say, right actions lead to right results, and wrong actions lead to wrong results. And we should learn that every friendship, every relationship has to be mutual. We can't impose ourselves on others, and they can't impose themselves on us without consent. But finally, and this is the thing that matters to me, there's glory at the heart of everything. There is the act of creation that began the universe that echoes, I think, personally, within the soul. And that's the great journey that I found Extra Life helping me make, the discovery of, I call it, the echo of the creation.
Peter Houghton also told us that we must stop being afraid of death. God made a universe in which we're born, and in that same universe we die. It's part of the global reality of life on this planet. When we come back, I'll be joined by Dr. Raymond Shelton, an expert in traumatic incident stress management for the Nassau County, New York Police and Fire Departments. We'll talk to him about grief on a national level.
Hello, I'm Nastasia, and I'd like to introduce you to Hello Channel, the innovative new way to learn English as a second language. If you can learn English, your opportunities expand. Knowing English allows you greater job options, more money, and a better lifestyle. Here's the best part. Learning English is now easy because Hello Channel brings it right to your home. Come join our classroom, enjoy great entertainment, and improve your vocabulary, all while you watch TV. A brighter future is ahead if you'll just say hello.
I'm here with Dr. Raymond Shelton, who has worked as a firefighter and paramedic. He's been with the Nassau County, New York Police Department 27 years? 27 years. He's been working in their police academy as emergency medical trainer for the students. But in that capacity, Dr. Shelton has developed the Traumatic Incident Stress Management Peer Support Program. That is a mouthful, Dr. Shelton. What in the world is that about?
Well, Dwight, when you talk about traumatic incidents such as what we've seen here at the Trade Center, we know that the police and fire and EMS personnel who go in and face that level of destruction and death are affected by that. And what the Peer Support Traumatic Incident Program does is provides them a means of being able to deal with that tremendous level of stress, the reactions that they have, and how to get them through so that on the opposite side they come out as healthy individuals.
So, Ray, you're down on the site of this horrific tragedy hours later. You've been there for days, you've been there for weeks. How are the rescue personnel surviving? The police, the firemen, what are they doing to cope?
How are they doing? It's a little bit difficult to determine that because they're affected by this. We speak in terms of the imprints of horror, that you can't go through something like this and come back to being exactly the same as you were. Those images are on your mind, the sights, the sounds, the smells are present, and they stay indelibly marked on our brains. And so I think each one of the folks that's in there have to recognize that this is a powerful time in their lives, and while they're functional and doing their job, they need to address the fact that this is something that they're going to have to reckon with in the days, weeks, months, and even years after this event is ended.
So, Ray, what can you possibly say to the families that have been left behind, the survivors?
You know, that's a question that comes up over and over and over. What do I say? And most often what happens, people don't say anything, and they resist being near those people because they're uncomfortable with that. I think the best piece of advice that I can offer is you don't have to say anything. What you need to do is be present, be connected to that person, provide a continual support, and let them know that they're not alone. It's the actions that speak much louder than any words that we could ever come up with. You just need to be there.
Yeah. How can we as a nation, we as Americans, get beyond the initial grief of this tragedy and survive ourselves?
I think that at the present time, what we need to be doing on a national basis and in every little living room across America is there has to be a sense of connection. Our basic safety, our basic security has been shaken. I think getting through a crisis like this requires us to be connected to each other, to provide a continued support, to be able to prepare each other for the days and weeks and months that will come up by knowing that we are together in this crisis and that we're not going to become an isolated group of people just going about our business. Connection is what's going to make us get through this time.
Ray, I want to move into this whole issue that really is at the heart of a whole lot of American, well, global questioning. Where is God in the middle of human crisis? You not only deal with the police and the firefighters, you're actually part of a diocese with spirituality at the core of what you offer. What do you say in the area of human spirituality? How does that factor into grief management?
I think the question that I hear most often, and I'm sure that folks who work within the clergy around the world could address, is the anger at God. How could God let this happen? I'm not so sure that we've got clear-cut answers that people will buy into. But the suggestion that I offer is that it's not that God lets these things happen, it's that God is there for us in the aftermath. The concept of God gave us life, and God promises us something at the end. The in-between is not that God directs and controls every action. I guess what I try to get people to understand is that we've been given free will. We've been given a wonderful brain. And I believe that God has simply said to us, now use it. Some of us will use it very well, and some of us will use it not so well. And this is the example of where the brain has been used in the inappropriate ways.
So what if God hasn't been a factor in my life at all? I've simply written him off, and yet I come to a moment of personal crisis and tragedy, and I'm sensing a God response within me. What do I do next? How do I respond to that response?
I think that when that point in your life comes, I think that is that time when we need to revisit that place that we've walked away from or maybe never visited initially. I think it's an awakening for many people. I think we've seen that where folks have talked of, I haven't been in a church in 20 or 30 years, but felt compelled to go and sit and be present. It's also God providing connection. Because I think when people who have felt on the outside have gone back to church or back to their synagogue, they have rejoined community, and that's what was necessary at this point in time. I believe that's God's hand.
Hello. That's right, I said hello. I'm talking about an exciting new television channel that will change your life. My name is Ruth, and I want you to be one of the first to know about Hello Channel. Hello Channel is designed to teach you to speak English. Anyone can learn. We offer something for everyone. You'll see programming for children, teenagers, and adults, all on different levels. With Hello Channel, you'll hear, see, read, and speak English as you're watching entertaining television programs, making it easy to learn. If you've always wanted to learn English but haven't had a chance, Hello Channel is perfect for you. Start today, and remember, for a brighter future, just say hello.
This skyline you're seeing has become a symbol of incomprehensible tragedy. It's a reminder to the entire world that life on this earth is transient. When someone close to us dies, or when we face our own death, the question that always comes up sooner or later is the question why. How did you feel when you saw the images of the World Trade Center collapsing? I've got to tell you that when I saw those towers explode in flames on my television screen, my stomach knotted, my heart twisted in pain for the horrific human loss. How can we possibly explain such an immense human tragedy? Every religion has its own answer to that question. The ancient scriptures tell the story of a God who in grief stands beside his Son as he dies upon a cross, a God who anguishes with the suffering, a God who weeps with the dying. The stories of human rescue and survival that have risen out of the ashes of New York City's ground zero are to me a symbol of God's promise of ultimate rescue. Death doesn't have to be the final word. God has the final word, and that final word is a promise of life. That's why I trust him, and why I believe you can trust him too. I'm Dwight Nelson. Join us next time for more of The Evidence.
I'll tell you what my life was like without faith. I wished I could have died.
Faith is one of those words like religion that people tend to associate with their grandmothers. Today we often use words like spirituality or energy instead. But there is a growing number of people finding a certain richness, a history of suffering and joy that still resonates when we hear the word faith.
Faith is more than like this magical, mystical thing that we cannot see.
Faith has become that calm peace that I live every day of my life.
Faith is a commitment to the eternal.
Faith is actually how I function in life.
There's an element of trust in faith.
I think faith is organic to life.
Faith to me is putting my trust and belief in something that is outside of myself.
It gives my life meaning. It gives me vision for the future. And it gives me a lot of hope.
It's a choice to believe as opposed to skepticism or cynicism. Faith is love, and so it's necessary to me.
We were created to believe in something outside of ourselves.
Whatever your definition of faith, there's no question that faith matters to the people who have experienced it. One of those who has not only experienced faith but studied it is Wade Clark Roof. After writing 8 books on religious trends in the United States, he's considered a leading expert. He had this to say about faith.
Faith is important because it provides an anchor for one's life. Faith says, in effect, when all else fails, this you can believe in.
Faith matters because I know enough about life to know that just what I have inside myself and to offer is not going to cut it.
The popular idea of faith is that it's a leap into darkness, that it is a jump from objective reality to some subjective myth or unseen thing. But I think that faith is actually a leap into the light.
Faith is important, but if I weren't raised with it, how do I go about getting it? Edie Hughes didn't discover faith until she was an adult.
My journey to faith has been an extremely long journey. It's been the majority of my life. I grew up thinking I had to do things to have faith. I had to be the good person. I had to do all the right things. I had to work. It's only been the last few years that I finally understood that there's nothing, absolutely nothing I can do to have faith except to give my life to God. Once I did that and understood it, my faith has grown by leaps and bounds.
At one time I thought maybe I am an atheist, maybe I don't believe in God. But that didn't last long because I found that there were too many unanswered questions, and I have more questions in my mind trying not to believe in God than I did when I put my belief in God. And so it was easier to believe than not to believe. And I just didn't have enough faith not to believe.
Faith can be a powerful thing, but for some, living with faith may seem harder than living without it. Is faith, no matter how nice an idea, simply naive? Science and our ability to reason are the tools that teach us the truth about the world. Or do they?
There was hope at one time that science and rationalism would answer life's most important questions. And they were able to answer a lot of important questions, like the what questions, what are things made of, or the how questions, how did things come to be here? But they've been unable to answer the why questions. Why do I exist? Why does anything exist? And the only hope of any kind of meaningful answer then is rooted in faith. I have to believe.
I think it's built into the human situation that we want to believe in a power higher than ourselves.
If there's nothing beyond the here and now and the things that I can see, that looks incredibly empty to me.
Faith embraces the total truth, beyond our immediate reality, beyond the seen, beyond what you can feel and sense.
I want to use reason as a tool, but there are times wherein the human mind is simply not capable of the tasks. For instance, the mystery of God. And there will be a failure of reason to comprehend. And in those times, I have to suspend rational judgment and allow faith its freedom and its creativity to embrace a God I cannot fully comprehend.
The only thing I can say to people is surrender. You have to come to the point where you're willing to give up all of it.
Without faith, I think I would shrivel and die. I would become something less than human. I would stop living. I might exist, but I would stop living.
Wings on a bird point to the reality of air. Sunflowers facing the sun point to the reality of light. Built into the human heart is a longing everyday life doesn't satisfy. That longing points to the reality of a God to have faith in. When we come back, we'll talk to Houston Smith, probably the most eloquent and respected world authority on why faith matters today.
We learned English.
Your kids can too. Just watch Hello Channel.
Houston Smith is the author of the best-selling book, The World's Religions, a standard textbook in universities across the land. And in fact, Dr. Smith, I should have brought my copy from college and had you autograph the book. There isn't hardly an American student that has not been acquainted with that best-selling book. But you have been active in writing. I hold here in my hands his latest book, Why Religion Matters, The Fate of the Human Spirit in an Age of Disbelief. PBS a few years ago, you did a 5-part series with Bill Moyers, right. 11 honorary doctoral degrees. We are delighted to have you here at The Evidence.
It's a great pleasure to be here.
Now, I suppose your fascination with world religion had something to do with the fact that you were born in China?
Well, it did actually, but more directly, it had to do with my parents, but they would not have been parents of sterling and powerful faith had they not had that faith to propel them to go to China and spread that faith to others.
So you were first, obviously, very significantly affected by your own parents' faith.
Absolutely. I have been a teacher all my life, and I find many of my students that their religious institution, church or synagogue, rubbed them the wrong way. And they picked up a lot of negativity. But mine was totally different. When I asked them, well, what do you have against religion? They say, first, it's dogmatic. All right. We've got the truth, and everybody else is going to hell in a wheelbarrow. Mm-hmm. And second, it's moralistic. Don't do this, that, and the other thing. That's not what came through to me from Christianity through my parents. It was rather, we're in good hands, and in gratitude for that fact, it will be well if we bear one another's burden. Yep. And with all my gallivanting through these other religions, I've never come upon a formula that has stayed in place as well as that has.
Let me ask you, speaking of these world religions and a formula, is there one definition of faith that fits all religions?
Well, I would say yes. It's like a theme with variations, but the theme that runs through faith, wherever it is used, is trust.
Okay.
And if you ask what it means to be a man or woman of faith, the basic answer is that trust is built in to your makeup.
What's the difference between faith and religion?
Religion is organized faith. I would say there is no religion that is not based on faith, and a specific faith, because then we get into the variations. The common theme that runs through is trust. But trust in what? How do you articulate that? That differs from within the various religions.
Have we outgrown this organized faith, as you described it a moment ago, as you described religion? Have we outgrown it?
I do not think so. Human beings are homo, that's the Latin for human being, right. Religiosus. We are the religious animal.
The religious organism. The religious
Why are
animal.
we religious organisms? We were made by the divine, and as such we carry the image of the divine within the product, within ourselves.
I see.
And when in Genesis it says that God breathed upon the creature that He'd made, breathed the Spirit. That Spirit is the Spirit of God. And that is the fundamental, most fundamental element in our nature. Deeper than sexuality, deeper than jealousy. Envy.
Is that the common ingredient to all religion?
Well, we have variations. Always, in the study of comparative religion, all the important points come out as, I've already said, theme and variation. So yes, that is the common theme.
You've spent your life studying world religion.
Yes.
You've spent your life examining faith or trust as you just defined.
I've been very fortunate.
What difference has religion made in your life?
Well, we all understand each ourselves imperfectly. So I won't say that I'm a clear image to myself, but as I understand it, it's made all the difference. It's the difference between living in a palace and living in a hovel, or maybe living in a prison. And how can a difference that great not impact a life very importantly? So I feel like it's the most important element in shaping me.
When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Houston Smith, and we're going to be joined by a very dear friend of his, Dr. Obadiah Harris, a philosopher. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Looking for a brighter future? Learn English and make it happen on Hello Channel.
We're talking with Houston Smith, author of Why Religion Matters and noted teacher on the subject of religion. Now we're joined by his good friend, Dr. Obadiah Harris. Welcome, Dr. Harris. You are president of the Philosophical Research Society, Los Angeles.
That's right.
Gentlemen, with you sitting right there together, let's plunge into this business of religion and science. Two competing worldviews, are they? Would you say competing worldviews?
I would.
In what ways?
Well, I would say that up until the rise of modern science, why, they fit together like hand and glove. That science dealt with what we could pick up with the empirical evidence of what we can pick up with our senses, this world, you might say, and religion dealt with what is greater than this world. But now they have fallen into positions of antagonist. And the reason is that science's successes in the material world have been so mind-boggling that we have slipped into the mistake of thinking that because it has done such miracles with the material world, it is the omnicompetent window to truth and can tell us the truth about the whole world.
Which
that
means
is not so.
Which means we're have the tendency to conclude that science, with all its achievements, really answers the ultimate questions, and we don't need anything beyond science.
That's the assumption. Answers them, or else they are unanswerable. In other words, whatever answers can be forthcoming come from science. Now that is dead wrong.
Now, Obadiah, dead wrong, Houston says, and you were very quick to state absolutely incompatible.
Yes, and I think that they are incompatible so long as science insists on being the sole proprietor of knowing what is reality. You see, it's the word reality that separates us.
Okay.
As if that which is immanent is real, that which is transcendent is unreal. If a scientist will take a little bit of humility and simply admit that there are some things they don't know about that may be real, then you have compatibility. Well,
you're not suggesting an intellectual arrogance, are you?
Yeah, I think I am. I think there is an intellectual arrogance and a dogmatism that is attached to science today because they do not want to consider that reality can have any other definition than the physical properties that we understand as reality.
I'm curious, Houston, world religions. Is this unique to Western thought that science and religion are kept apart? Eastern thought, would it bring science and religion together, or is science even a worldview to be contended with outside of the West?
Well, this is a conflict only in the Western world.
I see.
And the rest of the world, insofar as it is taking on Western modes of thought. But the rest of the world hasn't been shaped as much as we have by modern science and the controlled experiment, so it's not nearly the conflict there.
How would you make the case, Obadiah, then, to a scientist with an appeal to trust? Houston a moment ago defined faith ultimately as trust. How would you make the case for a scientist to trust?
I would say that every scientist has ultimate trust. They wouldn't even get into an experiment if they didn't trust. So trust.
Trust what?
Well, trust the laws of the universe.
Okay.
So in that way, we do have something deeply in common, in the trust, in the reliability of the laws of the universe. Every experiment they make has its foundation in that trust.
Then what step would a scientist need to take to move from trusting the laws of the universe to trusting a personal being?
Well, I think that's a big leap for most scientists.
Too big?
Too big for the scientists that I have known.
There's a metaphor I like. It's as though we human beings were in a gigantic balloon, and we have flashlights, and those are metaphors for the scientific method. And we can shine our flashlights on anything inside the balloon, but there's no way we can get our flashlights outside the balloon to determine where the balloon is in space.
So you're suggesting science operates inside the balloon, religion is what reaches outside that balloon.
Very well put. And if only we would recognize what that metaphor says, we would be past this whole agonizing antagonism and become partners, each recognizing that there's something that the other can do that it itself cannot do.
Obadiah Harris, Houston Smith, what a delight to have you on The Evidence.
A great pleasure.
Thank you very much. This is a subject that I'm sure you would enjoy digging deeper into. We have a website. It's just one word, theevidence.org, O-R-G. Click onto that website. The issue of faith and religion. It's one of the pivotal issues in life today. Check it out. We're going to be right back after a moment with some concluding thoughts.
Hello. 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 Hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey Dad, can you come out and shoot some hoops with me?
Sorry, I can't right now.
Dad, studies show that by the time I'm 12, I can be influenced by friends more than parents. You know Billy, he's a pretty good kid, most of the time. But do you really want him influencing me more than you?
Billy. Spot your 3 points.
Give your family everything. Give them your time. From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Sometimes faith can seem like a distant memory. Sometimes God can seem like someone we just can't imagine anymore. And yet people continue to rediscover Him. In fact, they encounter God with all the wonder of a wide-eyed child. According to the individuals who've talked about their experiences in this program, it's possible to remember again, to make faith work in our world today. You know, I think we sometimes subconsciously resist faith, resist trust. We won't quite allow ourselves to give in to a friendly universe. Maybe we've been disappointed. Something bad happened that we don't understand. Maybe we think we have good reasons for our misgivings. But have you ever asked yourself if chronic doubt isn't sometimes a form of sulking? We're like the child who refuses to come to the dinner table because we didn't get our way. We feel that God has let us down, and we're not going to give Him the satisfaction of showing up when He calls. But the people of faith we've heard from tell us, maybe it's better to come to the table, to stop standing in the corner. Maybe we've simply misunderstood our Father. And maybe with a new understanding, we'll realize that God can be trusted, that He is worthy of our faith. That's what I think. I'm Dwight Nelson. Join us next time for more of The Evidence. U.S. News & World Report recently conducted a survey on prayer. In this survey, 68% of Christians, 37% of Jews, and 92% of Muslims reported praying more than once a day. The same survey also asked how many of these prayers were answered. Fascinating. Only 28% of Christians, 13% of Jews, and 30% of Muslims said their prayers were always answered. Isn't God powerful enough to answer all my prayers? And if He is, why doesn't He? In just a moment, we'll talk to best-selling author of numerous books on prayer, Stormy Omartian. I'm Dwight Nelson, and welcome to The Evidence. Stormy Omartian's books on prayer have sold more than 6 million copies. She's a well-known public speaker, a popular author, and a songwriter. Stormy, we're delighted that you're joining us today from your home in Nashville.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Stormy, in your book, and I have it right here, you talk about times when you've prayed for healing and you admit you weren't healed. Those must have been very discouraging times. How did you handle all of that?
Well, one specific time where I wasn't healed, and not only wasn't healed, but I almost died, and I was sick for about 6 months, and we kept praying, my husband and I kept praying for healing. We didn't know what was wrong with me, and the doctors couldn't find anything, and I was in the emergency hospital so many times, and I could never find anything, and I never, you know, got healed. And finally my appendix ruptured, and I almost died, and they still couldn't find what was wrong with me for about 8 hours before they operated. But during that time, you know, you wonder, why doesn't God heal me? I mean, why didn't he hear me? You know, and I trust God enough to know that when I pray, I'm not telling him what to do. You know, I'm not just giving him a list and telling him what to do. I'm, you know, sharing my heart and sharing my longings and my needs. And if he doesn't answer in the way I want him to, then I know that he has a purpose for it.
You suggest that sometimes God may be holding off on answering our prayers. Why would he do that, especially when we're praying for something so important?
Well, you know, I know how hard it is when prayer is not answered. It's especially something that's so important to you. It's just agonizing, and it makes us angry and sad and frustrated and all those things. But I believe that God has a deep purpose in that, and that sometimes he delays the answer to our prayers a certain amount of time. Sometimes he probably has to accomplish a certain amount of things before he answers it, but I think often is that he wants to get our attention. He wants our attention to be totally focused on him, and he wants us to depend on him. He's really almost, in a way, testing our faith. Will we continue to have faith? Will we continue to believe in him? Will we continue to trust in him? Will we continue to depend on him and until we see the answers to our prayers? So he'll let us go so often until just all hope is gone, until we know there's no way that this could happen unless God does it. And he has done that so often in my life, where I'll pray for something, and there's no other way that it could have happened other than God answered that prayer. So I can never get too cocky and thinking, well, I did it myself, or things just turned out that way, or what a coincidence, you know, this all worked out. To another place where the air was clear and there was no crime, and I did not recognize the answer to my own prayers, and so here I'm grumbling and complaining. I'm surprised I didn't get struck with lightning at the time, because I was so grumbling about it and saying, God, why did you take me here? I don't want to be here. And then realizing later that God was answering my prayers. So many prayers, not just those, so many prayers that I had prayed.
You say that praise is the prayer that changes everything. What do you mean by that phrase?
Well, my definition of prayer is communicating with God. And the ultimate communication with God is praise, because it's pure in that it takes the focus entirely off of ourselves and places it entirely upon God. And when you do that, when you place your entire focus on God in worship and praise, his presence comes to dwell with you. And it says in the Bible that he inhabits the praises of his people, which is so exciting, because that means his presence is there every time you worship him. And when you're in the presence of God, I'm telling you, things change. Your mind changes, your attitude, your circumstances, your heart, all of those things begin to change. And the reason for that is, as you praise him, he pours of himself into you. It's like a funnel, you know, it's like this open funnel, and you open up to God in that way, in that pure praise and worship, and he pours his love and his peace and his joy, all of the aspects of him into your life. And that's why things begin to change in your life. The more you praise God, the more things change. And that's why praise is the prayer that changes everything.
Stormy, thanks so much for taking the time to share with us on The Evidence. God bless you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
In the movie Bruce Almighty, God, who's played by Morgan Freeman, makes the point that most people don't know what they really want when they pray. He shows how a yes answer to a prayer can really mess up a person's life. And when Jim Carrey uses his newfound God powers to answer yes to everyone's prayers, it leads to chaos and riots in the streets. The movie is fiction, of course, but it raises an interesting point. If God answered all of your prayers with a yes, would you have what you really want? Stay with us.
Looking for a brighter future? Learn English and make it happen on Hello Channel.
Welcome back. Mike Tucker, a chaplain who has worked in both hospitals and hospices, a pastor and the executive producer of this show, now joins me. Also joining us is Andrea Bartoli, professor of international conflict resolution at Columbia University and a member of the community of San Egidio, centered in Rome, Italy.
Yes.
Gentlemen, good to have you both. You know we're thinking prayer. Our conversation is prayer. So let me say that I have this friend. I pray for her. She has cancer. I ask God, please heal her. She dies. What's happening? My prayers obviously are a failure.
They're
Andrea?
not a failure.
They're not a failure.
They're not a failure. First of all, because if you are calling that person a friend, that's coming from God. So I think that to have somebody praying for a friend is already a gift of life that many do not have. Loneliness is a terrible sickness of these days, and prayer is actually a moment in which we are together in a ways that is difficult for many to understand. Death is a passage, and that friend of yours was actually probably blessed of having somebody close, somebody that was able to think beyond what we can see, the body alone, or what we can see as material things.
Now, Mike, as a chaplain, you have lived and moved in the realm of death. Have you prayed for people?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I had a struggle with this, to tell you the truth, when I worked as a pastor and as a chaplain in particular. I've attended probably 500 deaths. 400 of those within a span of 4 to 5 years when I was working as a chaplain. And it seemed to me that every time they called me, it was for someone who was dying, and I would pray for them and they would die. And I began to wonder, what is up with this? I mean, is this just a formality that we're going through? Finally, when I went back to pastoral work, there was a 16-year-old girl who came down with viral spinal meningitis.
Wow.
Doctors gave her a 15% chance to live 2 hours, a 0% chance to live the night. I went in and captain gowned up and had a prayer for her and prayed for healing. Her classmates were in the chapel of the hospital praying for her as well. After I prayed for her, I went to tell the young people to let them know that maybe, you know, we need to get ready for this girl's death, and they wouldn't hear of it. They prayed all night long. 6 weeks later, that girl walked out of the hospital.
Incredible.
And I all of a sudden had to reassess my understanding of prayer. What I've come to know through that process is that prayer, first and foremost, is an opportunity to seek the face of God. It is not so much a name it, claim it kind of a deal. It's not where I'm
demanding
going to,
that I need this gift and I need it now.
Although we can ask for things, but the primary purpose of prayer is to know God, to know His will, and to do His will in your life. That's the purpose. And when I pray and I know God better, or I know His will better, and I'm able to do that will, my prayer has been answered. Whether or not I've gotten the specific thing that I've asked for or not is not really the issue. Do I know God better, and can I do His will now?
And I do believe that there is a reduction when we equate prayer with demanding things.
Yes.
I think that prayer is much more than that. It's a moment in which we open up to life, we open up to God, we open up to something we do not know necessarily. And I think it's important not to force prayer into something that we control, that we know exactly what we think we want.
You take a classic illustration, Mel Gibson's global hit movie, The Passion of the Christ. the film actually opens, as you men remember, with Christ, with this Jesus of Nazareth in the Garden of Gethsemane, agonizing for something, and yet the irony is, or the enigma, what he asked for actually doesn't come to pass. So the skeptics, you're questioning Andrea.
No, I'm just responding that what he's asking doesn't come to pass.
And yet
in Jesus' terms, actually what he wanted was to have God's will done, not what he wanted. So in a way, there is an interesting paradox in Jesus' life, which is clearly crucial to the experience of faith, because...
So apparently your own will, for an individual praying as Jesus was, your own will may not necessarily be the same as the will of God. And you can clash. You can be a saint. You can be a person in perfection and still have a will that may be counter, if it's allowed to progress to the want of God.
Yeah, when I look at my 2-year-old child who is trying to get the book, you know, he may want to have the book, but may not get the book the right way that I would probably suggest him to get it. And I think that we have too much of a sense of a opposition when we think about my will and God's will. I think that on the contrary, that there is an expectation of God that in growing in the understanding, we will actually find the harmony that is momentarily lost.
And in fact, the model prayer, gentlemen, that Jesus taught, we call it the Lord's Prayer. Something in there, isn't there, about your will be done?
Sure.
And what does it mean to submit to the will of someone outside of yourself?
What it means is that as a creature such as myself, I may think that I want something, but it may not be the best thing either for me or for my family or for the greater plan, the world. It might not be the best thing, but God knows what the best thing is. And if I am truly going to live according to His will, and if I'm going to be His follower, then I have to ask that my leader's will take supremacy over my will, because His will is always best. That was the prayer of Jesus at Gethsemane. He said, I don't want to go through this. I don't want to face this. But more importantly, I want your will to be done, and that is that man be reconciled to myself. And so I'm willing to put my will aside and accept yours.
Hold that thought with a pause button. We want to find out what happened when a group of high school students took that idea to heart, and we'll find out right after this.
Paola.
Sí, mamá.
Ven acá, por favor.
I don't know how my mom knew, but I guess moms always know. I wasn't being very nice to one of the girls at school. I knew it was wrong. I knew I wasn't supposed to be mean. I guess I didn't think it was a big deal. But in one sentence, my mom helped me understand. She said, "Mija, you need to treat others the way you want to be treated." I thought about that a lot. I still do.
Life's most important lessons are best learned in the home. A message from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Learn English and have fun on Hello Channel.
We're talking about prayer in this episode of The Evidence. I'm here with Mike Tucker and Andrea Bartoli, the American representative at a most unusual community headquartered in Rome, Italy, San Angelio, the community of San Angelio. What's that community about?
The community of Sant'Egidio started in Rome in 1968 by the initiative of a young man who was 18, a high school student, read the gospel, gathered a few friends, and started a life of prayer, service, and friendship. Now is 60,000 people strong around the world, all living this simple life of prayer, service, and...
sorry for interrupting. Are they all young, like 18, 19, 20-year-olds?
Well, many of us grew up. I was 13 when I joined, but I'm definitely older now.
Yeah, okay.
But you have people who are 84. In New York, we have a wonderful lady, Margie, who is 84 years old, and
Really?
is a member of the community.
Okay.
All age, all race, all countries, and it's just based on prayer.
I was going to say, what's the purpose of the community? What do you do?
We just try to live the gospel. We do believe that the gospel is given to us as a whole, and that in prayer, friendship, and service, we can try to live by it, to try to make our life a gospel, a good news today.
I like that. Prayer, friendship, and service. Yeah, Mike, is this something of your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Who was it? It was Oswald Chamber who said that prayer does not prepare us for some greater work. Prayer is the greater work. Basically, the work of Christians is to pray. It is to be together, to love one another, to love those around us, to minister to their needs, but also to pray, because it's through prayer that we discover who God is, we discover what His will is, and a very important part of His will is that we meet the needs of one another, that we respond to each other in love. So absolutely, this is the kingdom of God on earth.
Now, Andrea, you've been involved in some major hotspots on this earth as a negotiator, as a peacemaker.
Sure, but that actually happened through the community.
Through your community. So prayer is a part of your negotiating strategy?
Well, it's more than that. I would say that prayer is the source of this desire for peace that is frequently lost in people's loneliness and fear. And in prayer, we find the source of that peace that is given to us. And it's very important to remember that, because very often we believe that peace is a product of a political settlement or something that has to do with our own decision. And we do believe that peace is actually received. Peace be with you is the word that is given to the disciples. And very often we do not pray enough, and we do not receive peace enough. And prayer is perceived as this place in which we demand things instead of receiving things. And I think that actually, for Sant'Egidio, there is no doubt that prayer is this moment in which a vocation is given, a meaning is given, a sense of dream is given, and peace is part of it.
So, gentlemen, I'm listening to you, and you have said prayer is not just about getting and receiving. Prayer is also about responding and acting in the human journey. So let's say I'm the skeptic, and I'm listening to you, and I'm saying, hey, very interesting. And Stormy was on just a moment ago, and so we're talking to Stormy about answered prayers. So as a skeptic, I'm thinking, you know, maybe I could try this reaching out to God. What would you say to me to get me on this journey of moving into the experience of prayer?
I'd say, first of all, keep it simple. Don't try to make prayer something very complicated. Attempt to talk to God just like you and I are talking to one another. Talk to Him as you would talk to a friend, and tell Him the truth. Tell Him what's on your heart. Tell Him what you need, what you desire, and the fact that you're a little bit skeptical about this. I would start with that.
No fancy language. I mean, we hear people who say thee and thou.
Yeah,
and
the old
all
King
that.
James English. No, we need to talk to God in the language that we're comfortable with, whatever that language might be.
Right.
And truthfully, if you really don't have any words for prayer, if you don't even know where to start, a wonderful place to do that is to simply get a modern translation of the book of Psalms and pray those words from the Psalms as though they were your own words.
Those ancient prayers.
Those ancient prayers, because they were written as prayers. They were songs, and they were also prayers, sometimes sung by the entire congregation as an act of worship. So take those prayers, change personal pronouns, and pray those, and you will find something interesting happening. Not only will you find yourself learning the process of prayer, but you will also discover something of God's will in those ancient prayers.
Andrea, you would add something to that.
Well, I would say take your heart seriously.
Take your heart seriously. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that God is within. I think that Jesus is very clear that the kingdom is within, and I think that you need to believe that God is speaking to you.
So does God draw me here? Is there some sort of reciprocal movement?
Absolutely. It was Eugene H. Peterson who said, prayer is answering language. So God speaks to us first. He puts it in our heart to pray. It's the kingdom of God within you, what you were talking about. He puts it in my heart, even before I believed in Him, even before I wanted to know Him. He put it in my heart to pray, and so I answered Him. And that's what prayer is. It's answering God.
Andrea and Michael, thank you so much for sharing out of your own prayer journey, your faith journey. The earth now holds 6 billion people. The community of San Egidio, started by a high school student, has transformed the lives of tens of thousands of people. One person, or maybe one small group of people who are committed to an idea, can transform a city, a country, the world. We'll be right back for a final thought.
Hello. That's right, I said hello. I'm talking about an exciting new television channel that will change your life. My name is Ruth, and I want you to be one of the first to know about Hello Channel. Hello Channel is designed to teach you to speak English. Anyone can learn. We offer something for everyone. You'll see programming for children, teenagers, and adults, all on different levels. With Hello Channel, you'll hear, see, read, and speak English as you're watching entertaining television programs, making it easy to learn. If you've always wanted to learn English but haven't had a chance, Hello Channel is perfect for you. Start today, and remember, for a brighter future, just say hello.
I don't know what disappointments you've had in your life. I don't know what you've concluded about what prayer can do or can't do. But may I ask you to do this? Give conversation with God an honest try. No connection you can make is more important. At first it may be just a stumbling step. God help me. It may be just a tentative attempt to extend your trust. And even if you have given prayer a shot and didn't feel you were getting anywhere, believe me, God's listening. Remember, prayer is opening up your heart to God just like you would to your very best friend. The friendship that can develop, the trust that can grow is worth the investment. I know, and you can too. I'm Dwight Nelson, and that's what I believe. Join us next time for more of The Evidence. In a way, we're all scientists, aren't we? Trying to make sense out of our lives and the world around us. I mean, some things seem pretty clear, established facts that we can count on. But sometimes, have you noticed, it seems that we're standing on the very edge of the light, reaching one hand out into the dark unknown, feeling around for something, or is it someone? What's out there? Who's out there? Is God somewhere in that mysterious, unseen region, hiding just beyond our reach? I'm Dwight Nelson. Welcome to The Evidence, where we're about to step into the very heart of the debate over the existence of God. This is the crossroads of faith and science. Dr. George Murphy is a Lutheran pastor and a theoretical physicist and the author of the book, The Cosmos in the Light of the Cross. Dr. Murphy, thank you for joining us. I would think you would be perfect for this because you're a theologian and scientist. Perfect to answer the question, why can't science prove the existence of God?
Well, I think the answer that I would give depends a great deal on what we mean by God. If God is fundamentally revealed in the cross and resurrection of Christ, then there is a basic sense in which God is hidden. Because in God's revelation in the cross, God is paradoxically hidden. The cross doesn't look anything like what we expect God to be. And if that's characteristic of the way God works, then we would expect God to be hidden from our natural observation in the world as well.
But not revealed in nature itself? No, if I can use this nomenclature, no fingerprints of the divine?
That depends on where we start. If we try to start in just a neutral, objective way as much as we can, without any religious presuppositions, then no, we don't see fingerprints. However, if we start from the belief that God is indeed revealed in the cross, that that's what tells us who God is and what kind of God He is, then we can look at the world in that light. That's why the title of my book. We can look at the world in that light and hope to discern the presence and activity of that God in the world.
So if there's no cross story, as you've referred to it as, then there's no possible way to know God.
There is, from a Christian standpoint, no. I mean, that is fundamentally where God, that's the core of where God is revealed.
Then if God is not revealed, see if I have you have it straight here. If God is not revealed in nature, is the cross the only place that a human being can go to understand who this God is?
Well, remember, I referred to the cross resurrection event.
Okay.
I mean, that is in turn part of the whole biblical story. I mean, really, the cross is the high point, the center of the whole revelatory work of God that we read about, that's witnessed to in Scripture. And so in that sense, that is what we mean by speaking about God's revelation. But then, as I said, if in light of that we look at the world, we can then see the signs of that God's presence and activity there. So it's not that God isn't active in the world at all, but just that we have to know what God we're looking for.
Can you find this God? Let's just refer to Him as this God. Can you find this God within the disciplines of science? Or is science, are you suggesting science is essentially atheistic? There just is no God in science?
I think science by itself does not make any religious assumptions. And that there are plenty of people who are excellent scientists who are atheists. And the fact that they are atheists doesn't keep them from doing good science. So in that sense, yes, science is not theistic. Maybe that would be a better way to put it.
But obviously, you have found a congruence between science and theology in your own person, because you have blended the two disciplines.
Yes.
How do you live with that?
Because I begin with the belief in the God who is revealed in Christ. And I understand my science in light of that. And I think many other scientists who are also Christians approach it in a similar way.
Let me bring into our conversation here, you're a scientist, theologian, let me bring a theologian and a philosopher in and pursue this issue of science and God. We're going to be back in just one moment. Stay right there.
Thanks for watching Hello Channel. Learn the language of the internet, travel, commerce, and diplomacy. Watch Hello Channel and learn English. Do it for yourself.
We're asking why science can't prove the existence of God. Joining us in our studio are Dr. Philip Clayton and Dr. Douglas Guyvet. Dr. Clayton is professor of theology at Claremont School of Theology, and he's author of numerous books, including God and Contemporary Science, which I have right here.
And Dr. Guyford is professor of philosophy at Biola University's Talbot School of Theology. And his literary credits include Evil and the Evidence for God. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Joining George and me here at this table. We're talking science and God. Now, Doug, you just heard George a moment ago. God and science, not really. Do you concur?
I don't concur with that. I do think that God, having created the universe, has left his fingerprints all over the place.
In what ways?
Well, let's start with the beginning. The origin of the universe is something that scientists have something to say about. They can tell us approximately how long ago it happened, and they have a good story to tell about how it happened, or at least how the beginning then resulted in the kind of universe we now have. What they can't explain, of course, is how the Big Bang, the big explosion that started this whole thing, occurred. What was the cause of that? That's beyond science, but science can bring us to that point, and in that sense provide us with evidence for the existence of God.
Phil, George, theoretical physicist that he is, you're a philosopher. Evidence for God within the natural world?
Yeah. I have to concur with George that science is not the sort of discipline that can go about demonstrating the existence of God or any other deity. And yet, Doug is right to speak about evidence. There is evidence in the natural order. We just have to find the sort of argument, the sort of way of putting the pieces together to let that evidence speak, to let it be most convincing.
So I'm not a scientist, I'm not a philosopher, I'm not a theologian, okay? Let's just say I'm just walking down the street. In my journey through life, can I put my fingers on that evidence that you just spoke about, Phil?
The evidence that you're going to find is going to be more of a personal nature, it's going to be more of a philosophical nature.
So it's experiential, it's what I experience, not what I see or touch,
But
as
not just
in a laboratory.
Right, but not just subjective evidence either. There's a way in which the whole world fits together, I think, more powerfully with the hypothesis of the existence of God than in the hypothesis that there is no intelligence behind the whole universe. It's just that the scientific equations aren't going to give you that.
And George, is that making sense? Scientific equations don't give us God.
I would agree with that. I would also say that what we consider to be convincing evidence depends on where we're starting from, what our presuppositions are. Theology has been spoken of, often is spoken of, as faith in search of understanding. If we start from the standpoint of faith, then yes, we look at the world and we see things that help us further to understand what we believe, to strengthen our understanding of who God is. But that's because we start from that standpoint of faith.
Do you think that God has intentionally hidden himself from human curiosity?
In one sense, yes. I think the fact that God is hidden is, in an important sense, grace, because it means that we can understand the world on its own terms, in terms of natural processes and the scientific laws that describe them. And that allows us to be mature citizens of creation, rather than simply children who have to be told the answer to everything.
But Doug, you don't consider yourself a child that has to be told the answers to everything. You're saying there's evidence out there.
That's
I can
right.
identify that evidence and conclude supreme being, perhaps even a benevolent creator.
Yeah, well, what I think is that we as human beings are by nature evidence sensitive. We're highly sensitive to evidence. When we cross a busy street, even without thinking about whether our evidence supports the decision to cross, we are monitoring our environment and we are making decisions about the safety of crossing in a kind of subliminal way, aren't we? Picking up evidence and using it to get by in the world. I think that's going on all the time. And like Philip was saying, there are all sorts of personal ways that evidence plays a role in the guidance of our lives and the way we think. So we're picking up on all of these things. Now when we do theology, or what's sometimes called natural theology, we want to give an argument. We can take the same data that's available to us in our experience and then formulate an argument using that data.
And George, you're not suggesting that there is no internal or existential personal experience that corroborates it?
No,
I'm
not say that.
Yeah.
No, but again, we simply don't come to God on the basis of our experience by ourselves. That our experience is, if we take the Christian claim seriously, that God is revealed in Christ, then that helps us to make sense of our experience of ourselves and of the world, and to see that in the light of our understanding as creatures of God.
So, Phil, science has a role in somehow ushering humanity to God?
I'm afraid I have to part with Doug on that question. The strange thing for me as a Christian intellectual is to realize that science has an autonomy as a way that we gather knowledge of natural processes. And though it shows us order, it shows us beauty, it shows us harmony, it doesn't show us the sorts of things that I hold as a person who believes in God. And it's strange that there's this limit there beyond which we simply cannot go until we make a move into a more philosophical or existential style of argument.
Do you think that's an externally imposed limit, a divinely imposed limit, or is that just the way it is because of our finite thinking?
You know, you have to wonder, if God had offered proofs of his existence in nature, how would that relationship of faith been possible? Isn't part of our humanness is that quest to understand what is the nature of this universe we live in?
But here's the deal. Any number of scientists and other intellectuals will claim that the evidence that they deal with on a routine basis has provided them with reason to believe. Now, I think it's true that you need other evidence as well. It's not just scientific evidence, but philosophical data, the data of experience and so forth. And I think, too, that when we start thinking about God, we start small. We take a small amount of evidence, we consider what its implications are, and if we start in the right place, then we can build on that and move towards something like what George was talking about here, where we expect God to produce a revelation in order to address the questions that we all have living in this world as we do.
I want to press that God-science interface a little bit harder when we come back in our next segment. Stay right there. We'll be back with our guests as we pursue this fascinating subject. Is there scientific evidence for the existence of God? Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Learn English at home. Just say hello.
We've got Dr. Philip Clayton, Dr. Doug Guyvet, and Dr. George Murphy talking about God and science. I want to get back, Dr. Murphy, to, in fact, let me inject here. There is a fascinating paradigm today called the intelligent design movement. I'm assuming, George, that you're not real comfortable with that paradigm.
That's right. Now, I think it's important to say that there are at least a couple of ways that we can understand the idea of intelligent design. One, in the very basic sense, is to say God is the creator of the universe. God, in some sense, has designed creation, and certainly I would agree with that. But as the phrase intelligent design is used in these recent conversations, it contains the idea that intelligent design should be an explicit part of our scientific theories and our scientific explanation of things, so that some phenomena like the origin of life can't be explained without invoking the idea of an intelligent designer. And I do not agree with that.
Philip?
To attempt to place God within a scientific hypothesis strikes me as just not plausible. So when William Dembski, the name that we associate with intelligent design, says that we can find from mathematical models the necessity of postulating an intelligent designer, says, well, I don't mean by that a religious hypothesis, just an intelligent designer, something like God. I have to say, no, that's mixing apples and oranges, two types of concepts. Now, if somebody said the kind of order we find in the universe philosophically is better explained by postulating God than to say there is no designer, and places his argument up at that philosophical level, I have to endorse it. I think it's a powerful sense of some type of orderer lying behind this universe when we look at it, but not a scientific argument.
Doug, I gather from what you said just a moment ago that you would be comfortable with that paradigm.
Yeah, I think that science there reaches a limit. And that's what Philip is saying, that There may be a limit to what science can explain, if it's irreducible complexity or something else, the origin of the universe. And at that point, you might have a metaphysical or philosophical explanation in terms of God. That's the way I think science contributes to the case for God's existence. Where I disagree with George is when he says that we should expect a fully naturalistic explanation for these cases of complexity and the sorts of things that drive the intelligent design movement. And I don't see anything like that in the offing or any reason to expect that scientists will develop theories that can explain those things without God.
Then let me ask you gentlemen, the three of you, what kind of evidence would it take to prove God? Is there anything in the natural world that if we just had that, it would cinch the case?
I don't think that any kind of scientific evidence is going to cinch the case for everybody. There is certainly evidence that will suggest to people that there is a God. There is evidence that for believers confirms their belief in God. But there's nothing, I think, that can be considered a open and shut proof of the existence of God.
And yet, all three of you, scientist, philosopher, theologian, all three of you believe in God. If I understood that correctly? Yeah. All right. So I'm the skeptic, okay? And I'm saying, okay, I'm into science, I dabble a little here, a little there. But I've been through high school, I've been through college. It's ingrained in me that the evidence is not there. What would you say to me? To say, hey, wait a minute, don't give up yet, Dwight. I think if you would do this, you might find the God I found. What would you say to me?
I would say put yourself in a position to hear the message of Jesus Christ. That is, to hear the message of the gospel and open yourself, try to at least suspend disbelief and hear that. Because I think the gospel has creative power to change people and to bring them to faith. And then in light of that faith, again, as we've said, one can look at the world and understand better what we mean to speak about God.
Phil, what would you say to me?
Whether you're comfortable using religious terms or not, you're on a quest for meaning. You're confronted with the various aspects of your life, the relationships that are good, the death that surrounds you. You know that someday you will die. And every human being has to answer for himself or herself, what is the purpose of it all? The only way to answer questions like that, it's not science, but is to raise these broader sorts of philosophical views. I think that the hypothesis that there is a God behind this entire order is the most powerful.
Doug, how about you?
Well, Dwight, I would say to the skeptic that any encounter with God is an encounter with a personal being who wants to be known. And because we're talking about a person discovering another person, the evidence can be very different for different people, and how they work through that evidence can be very different for different people. I would say, think first about why we have a universe in the first place. Science cannot explain that. Then, once we've got a designer who created the universe, we can make sense of the design features of the universe. And then ask this question: if such an intelligent, powerful being who presumably arranged a universe for our flourishing and our welfare really did do that, then why do we have the problems that we have in the universe? And I think that drives then the expectation that there's more to knowing about God than just this. And you look at the religious scene, and of course I think that the best evidence we've got historically to confirm what God is really like is the evidence of the resurrection of Jesus and even of the cross of Jesus Christ, as George was saying.
Three men on three faith journeys. Dr. Murphy, Dr. Clayton, Dr. Guyvet, thank you very much for being here and sharing your faith journey. We're all on a journey. This has been a challenging topic, the intersection of science and faith. I have a final comment I want to share with you in just a moment, so stay right there as we put a wrap to the evidence.
Hello. That's right, I said hello. I'm talking about an exciting new television channel that will change your life. My name is Ruth, and I want you to be one of the first to know about Hello Channel. Hello Channel is designed to teach you to speak English. Anyone can learn. We offer something for everyone. You'll see programming for children, teenagers, and adults, all on different levels. With Hello Channel, you'll hear, see, read, and speak English as you're watching entertaining television programs, making it easy to learn. If you've always wanted to learn English but haven't had a chance, Hello Channel is perfect for you. Start today, and remember, for a brighter future, just say hello.
Ultimate questions about God's existence can never be resolved by laboratory experiments or deep space probes. To find answers, we have to look beyond the farthest limits of science, and that's an act of faith. According to the Bible, faith is the evidence of things not seen. This isn't blind faith, but faith with eyes wide open, faith that sees the truth illuminated by divine revelation. That revelation opens a way for you and me to experience an intimate connection with a personal God, the God who doesn't hide Himself from those who truly seek Him. I'm Dwight Nelson, and that's what I believe. Join us next time for more of the evidence.